there, welcome back. Today's the day I'm going to be blocking this giant tapestry here behind me. Now, some of you might be wondering, what is blocking exactly? What does it even mean? And essentially blocking is a knitter's process of setting knitting into a very specific shape. So this piece was made with 100% Australian wool, and wool is a natural fibre. So fun fact, natural fibres aren't completely smooth. They have something called scales along the follicle. So if, for example, you were to take your own hair and you run your fingers down in one direction, it's smooth. But then if you run your fingers in the opposite direction, your fingers will start to catch just a little bit. And that's because the scales of the hair actually start to sort of catch on the tips of your fingers. So when a natural fibre is in a knitted state like this, those scales, when rubbed together, will actually interlock and can sort of lock into a very specific shape. So the process of blocking is to tease those fibers out of whatever shape they've found themselves in, and then to reset them into a different shape. So a great example of this actually is if you accidentally put your favorite jumper into the dryer, and your favorite jumper gets agitated with motion and heat and humidity. All these things sort of conspire against the fibers of your favorite jumper, and tease the scales of the fiber into a different shape than maybe the shape it was before it went into the dryer. So sometimes you'll open up the dryer and you'll find that your favorite jumper is like suddenly significantly smaller, and that's not because that there's less materials or that the actual fiber has shrunk exactly. It's just that it's the scales have locked together so tightly that the whole piece seems to be much smaller than it used to. So those sort of situations can be rectified. I'm here to tell you that there is a solution, and that is to tease those fibers out of that new state and into another state, and that's a process called blocking. So that's what that means. But you might be wondering now, Sarah, why do you need to block this thing? It looks fine. And I did want to explain that this piece was originally made in 7 different panels. So I can maybe even show you. So each panel, you can see here, there's a seam here. So it's basically that, each panel is about that, this to the end there, that wide, and each panel is the same length of the actual tapestry. So when I was making this piece, we lived in a very different place. We didn't really have the space to lay them all out properly. So I was just blocking them on the ironing. So I blocked each individual panel on the ironing board using steam, and that's one process for blocking. But the problem with that, obviously, is that they were each blocked individually, and there was a lot of time between each blocking, and then the last few panels were actually blocked in a completely different place altogether. So they've ended up being in slightly different shapes, which is a little bit problematic. So I can even show you. So this last piece here, this last one, you can see here, it's sitting on top of just a yoga mat. So we know that the yoga mat here is square, and you can see that the edge of this last panel here is almost right on the edge of the yoga mat. So it's really close, like, maybe half a centimeter difference. But if you follow your eye along all the way to the end there, you can see that it's more than just half a centimeter. There's maybe a couple of, it's just a smidge shorter down that end with the first panel that I knitted compared to the last one. So the difference isn't massive. I mean, considering how big this tapestry is, the difference isn't huge. But to my eye, it's big enough that I do actually just want to go ahead and fix it, because it's this piece, when it's going to go on display, it's going to be in a frame, and the frame obviously will need to be rectangular. So I can reblock this and tease in a single piece, reblock it, and then pin it down. Now that I've got some space to do that, I can pin it down and then set the fibers into a rectangular shape, so that the frame, when it finally goes into a frame, it will kind of line up nicely. with the edges of the frame. So that's the thinking here. Now the next question is the how. This knitted tapestry is 15 kilos without water, and I don't know how heavy it's going to be with water, so that's going to be an interesting element to the process. And also it's obviously much too big for my laundry trough, and I don't have a kiddie pool or anything, so I thought I might just have to drop it in the bath. So this thing's gonna literally get a bath today, and the process I'm going to use is instead of using steam and heat, which is one way to do blocking. Considering I've already used steam and heat on each individual panel before, I thought maybe that's possibly something I don't want to do again. So instead, I might just give it a nice cold bath, and about 10 to 15 minutes in the bath should be enough for the natural fibers to just kind of plump up and kind of release out of the current shape that it's in, and then because it will be full of water, and then I'll need to try to. I'm not allowed to wring it because that's bad for the fibers, but I need to kind of pat it dry, get as dry as I can, and then I need to pin it down and kind of tease it into this new shape, and then as the fibers. So I guess kind of as the water dries and the fibers kind of shrink a little bit, that's when the scales will interlock again into its new state. And if it's pinned into a particular shape, then it should actually just set it into that new shape, and then it should just be rectangular. So that's the thinking. The process will be interesting. It'll be a bath and 15 plus kilos of carrying a giant tapestry around. I've also got a tarp. You'll see that in the background there. I need to lay that underneath the yoga mat because I don't want to have really sopping wet giant tapestry sitting on my floorboards for too long. So yeah, I've got a tarp, and then the yoga mat, and then the tapestry, and then I think I'll need to buy more pins. I'm guessing pinning it down will take about 200 to 300 pins. I'm not sure. That could be an interesting discovery. So we'll see how we go. Wish me luck. Bye. So this piece is actively dripping. I can hear it. I can hear the water dripping down between the bathtub and the stool that I put down. And I don't want to move it whilst it's actively dripping because I don't want to be traipsing through the house and leave a water trail. So I might just leave it where it is for now, and just let all the water drip through. And when it stops dripping like a torrent, I'll see if I can move it then. So I'll just leave this here for a couple of minutes. Now there's lots of water on the floor, but it doesn't sound like it's dripping as much as it was before. Before it sounded like a waterfall or a torrent of water was coming out of this piece. But now it's kind of drip, 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 which I'm a bit more confident about moving it now. Right, let's find out how much it weighs. Right. Now that I've laid this one out onto the yoga mat, I know that before I saturated it with water, it was actually smaller than the yoga mat. It was quite a bit shorter and also shorter in both length and height. But now that it's full of water, it's actually quite a bit bigger than the yoga mat. So I'm going to need to be really careful when I pin it down, because I actually need it to shrink a fair bit in the process. So when I pin it down, I need to make sure that when it shrinks, it doesn't develop any bubbles in certain spots or any scalloping, particularly along the seams. So there's going to be a bit of a process in teasing this into just the right shape. So fortunately, I do have a yoga mat to measure it by, and I have a rough idea about how big it needs to be compared to how big it is right now, which is quite a bit bigger than I expected. So I guess I'll start pinning. Okay, and we're done. This tapestry has finally been blocked and pinned down back onto the yoga mat. So the process that you just saw, a bit laborious. I think what I would do differently is probably using some kind of a chicken wire frame over the bathtub, so that when I pull the tapestry out of the bathtub, I can just lay it on some kind of a chicken wire so that the water can just drip straight back down into the bathtub. So I did actually make quite a bit of a mess in the bathroom in the end. So I had to put down a whole load of towels to stop up all that extra water that was coming out of the tapestry as I was pulling it out of the bathtub. It was also super heavy as I was pulling it out. So I knew it would be heavier than 15 kilos. Wasn't entirely sure how much heavier, but obviously as I was pulling it out, there was still a lot of water in there and the water was still seeping out. So pulling it out was quite laborsome. It did take quite a bit of work there. And when I brought the tapestry back into this room, I quickly stepped on some scales just to double check. And the tapestry by itself did end up being 28 kilos when it's full of water. So it did put on over 10 extra kilos in weight. So yes, big heavy tapestry. The other weird experience was as I was pressing it down into the water, it was bubbling, kind of like it was trying to breathe. So it was an awful experience. I felt like I'm drowning in my tapestry. So that was a little bit uncomfortable to do. So finally got it all pinned out. The pinning out process was by far the most frustrating, because I did end up using a lot of pins. So I thought maybe I would end up using about 200 to 300 pins. It ended up being 450, so I definitely way overestimated that as well, or way underestimated that. Yeah, so interestingly, when I did lay it out onto the mat at first, it was actually quite a bit bigger than the mat. So it was actually stretching a good 10 centimeters over the edge of the mat on, if you combine the two sides, in total it was about 10 centimeters wider. And I wasn't expecting that because previously it had never been bigger than this yoga mat. So seeing it get that much bigger, seeing such a big difference was really interesting. But obviously, as I've started pinning it out, it has started to dry already. It's still quite wet, obviously. But when I started to sort of tease it to fit back on to the yoga mat, I'm trying to pat it down and get it to sort of tease it into the right shape. It wasn't fighting me too much. Like, it wasn't like there wasn't much scalloping. There wasn't much like it could actually lay flat quite easily. So yeah, that was quite reassuring. And you can see the final lay. So it's going to take a few days to dry. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. Right now, it smells like a wet dog in here because obviously wool is a natural fiber, so it does have a certain smell to it. Yeah, so it is quite stinky here. I'm going to leave all the windows open and the doors open for the rest of the day. And yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye on it because I don't want it to grow any mold or anything underneath it. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on it, but it should be fine. Fingers crossed. We'll see how we go. But yeah, I will just show you those edges. So if we come back to this edge here, you can see I've pinned it really, really close along the edge. It's back to being about half a centimeter off that edge. And if we follow it along, all the way along, I have managed to get it nice and consistent, well, reasonably consistent all the way through. So you can see off into the distance, it's now sitting quite nicely along that edge, which it wasn't doing before. Of course, it's still pinned, so I won't really know for sure how it's going to go until I've removed all the pins. So I'll definitely give you an update on that later on, but I'll even turn the corner. There you go. Down that edge, it's looking really good. Follow that one along. Oh, here we go. And we'll turn this corner as well. Down that edge, it's looking really good too. So yeah, really happy with how it's managed to shape up. And as you can see across the piece, it really hasn't bubbled or anything at all. So yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed everything has turned out really well. So far so good. And yeah, I'll let you know what it's like after it's dried and all the pins are removed. So stay tuned. Bye for now.